observation. Your best chance is to run from this place.
Go, go, go!
On Shadyside, we're all cursed. The devil is in me.
Any tips for fighting these things? Try not to die.
Hey guys, Smiling Reviewer here, and today is a special video, not because I have a really bloody obvious pimple on my forehead, but because we are reviewing a new unique Netflix project, which is the Fear Street Trilogy. For those of you who aren't aware of this series, it's a new trilogy consisting of 3 horror slasher movies that were all filmed back to back with the intent of having a unique month-by-month release in cinemas between the 3 movies. But with the COVID pandemic, it ultimately ended up going to Netflix, released on an episodic weekly schedule over 3 weeks, and has an overarching story, despite being set in different time periods. Our first movie, Fear Street 1994, being a similarly dark, yet tongue-in-cheek, energetic take on the 90s slasher flick, much like the original 1996 Scream. Fear Street 1978, having a more old school, fun, classic 80s teen slasher vibe, kind of like Friday the 13th. And then Fear Street 1666, set in a completely different 17th century setting, culminating the entire story arc into a finale. But yeah, firstly, before I get into what I thought of these movies, just that idea of a trilogy being filmed back to back and released in cinemas month by month, I think that's such a cool new idea because I've always seen moviegoing as a shared experience. So having a trilogy released month by month is a great excuse for people to meet up again monthly and experience a multi-film story together. But honestly, as biased as I am because I adore the cinemas and going to the cinemas, I think these movies actually benefited from being released on streaming services instead in a more episodic week-by-week style, and I'm not sure it would have been as successful in cinemas. But despite that, it was still a really enjoyable trilogy that me and my group of mates virtually watched together online every few nights while we were in lockdown, and we all really enjoyed it. It's definitely a great set of movies to experience with a group of friends because it has some pretty shocking moments of not just storytelling, but it really leans into that old school slasher vibe and doesn't hold back on the violence at all, which was one of the major reasons it was so enjoyable in my opinion. The Fear Street Trilogy is directed by Leigh Janiak, who I thought did a great job at just having a well-realized story and making each movie have its own identity whilst having a very consistent theme. The Fear Street Trilogy's overall story centers around a group of teenagers who work together to try and break a mysterious curse that has been influencing their town of Shadyside for hundreds of years. The way this story was told was really cool as well, because it's not told in a linear progression. Like, it's not like you have the first one and then after the first one ends, the second one is just a direct follow-up and so on. It's actually almost told in reverse. Like, the first one, we're introduced to this town of Shadyside in 1994, and then some terrifying stuff begins to happen, but as an audience, we have no idea what is happening or why, and that's exactly what the next 2 movies start exploring. And while they're all still connected in ways I won't spoil, the next 2 preceding movies are set in time periods before the first one, and slowly begin to unravel this mystery of what on earth is going on, which adds a lot of fun to this trilogy. There seems to be a trend of fun horror movies coming out, and what I mean by that is there's an emergence of horror movies that are a lot more light-hearted, with more humor and more mild scares that won't exactly give you nightmares. But to be honest, I'm enjoying most of them, as long as they're done well and are a bit unique. But it's fun going into the movie knowing it'll probably get my heart racing a bit, but I also know I'm not going to have a heart attack like I might going into The Conjuring or something. I think it's a perfect way for people to experience the joys of the horror genre, especially those that aren't necessarily interested in being terrified to their core. The Fear Street films were a lot of fun though. The characters were all a lot of fun, and I thought all the actors generally did pretty good jobs. Fear Street Part 1, 1994, was a great intriguing setup to our world and our characters. Kiana Madeira plays our lead, Dina, and I thought she did a fine job. I didn't think she was amazing or anything, and she definitely did better in some scenes compared to others, but she didn't stand out as much to me as other cast members such as Benjamin Flores Jr. and Julia Rewald did. Gillian Jacobs was also a great addition to the cast, but I'm a bit biased in that because I've loved her since Community. But the biggest standout for me in this first movie was when I realized what they were doing with the villains of the film. It was just a really creative take on the slasher flick and was a lot of fun. Fear Street Part 2 1978 though was probably my favourite of the three because it was just the most fun. It really lent into that 80s teen slasher vibe, and there was some great deaths in this one that got some great reactions out of me and my mates while we were watching it together. Sadie Sink was also really great in it. It was nice seeing her outside of Stranger Things, but to be honest, she kind of played the same character, but it worked especially well in this movie. McCabe Sly also was a standout and did a great job as Tommy Slater in this second movie. Fear Street Part 3 1666 was a little bit weaker and less fun than the other installments, in my opinion, but I thought it was still really enjoyable because of the unique time period it's set in. But the last half of Part 3 I thought was so much fun and such a great finale to wrap up the story and trilogy as a whole. The whole trilogy almost feels like a love letter to older horror films, and definitely slasher films because there are so many homages to those found throughout this trilogy in things like the setting, some of the sets, the music, the characters, even some of the kills. All in all, I had such a fun time with all three movies. The story was great, the characters were generally all pretty good, the cinematography was also pretty great in all three movies. All the movies looked visually fantastic, especially I loved the aesthetic of the Neon Mall in 1994. All the violence and deaths were done fantastically as well. It was obvious that a lot of impressive practical elements were used, so major props to the special effects and makeup crew of these films. But yeah, the Fear Street trilogy I think is a great lockdown watch, and the trilogy as a whole gets a nice 7.5 out of 10 for me. Would definitely recommend you watch them with some friends, especially maybe tonight since it's Friday the 13th. Doesn't get much more fitting than that. But if you are someone who hates horror and gets scared easily, I also get scared super easily, and I thought these movies were honestly not that scary. Like, a pretty good level of scary. I'd compare it to Stranger Things, but like maybe a few notches scarier than Stranger Things, and also if Stranger Things was very gruesome and violent. And that's also a little bit of a warning. This movie is quite violent, so it depends whether you enjoy that kind of thing, but I love that kind of thing, so I was all for it. But anyways, thanks for watching this one, guys. I really enjoyed talking to you guys about this trilogy, and I really do think it's worth checking out. Don't forget to leave a like below if you did, and subscribe for more content, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. See you later.